Good evening. Welcome, everybody. I hope you've all logged on to this Zoom webinar this evening. This is the first of what we hope will be a series of Views from the Bridge, which the RNRMC is hosting. I'm Stephen Watson. I'm a Vice President of the charity and thrilled when Adrian suggested that we might stand this up. Tonight, with a very special guest, we are in a studio, actually the CTN studio in central London. The Commodore and I are 2 meters apart, so we're quite safe. And there'll be no shaking of hands or anything like that. And hopefully everybody is well and safe at home. I think about 50 of you are online already and more joining in a minute or so. This is a privileged conversation this evening for friends and family of the charity, and importantly the Nelson's Company, which most of you are members of. If you're not, I'm going to do a plug at the end of this. Make sure you do sign up and become part of the Nelson's Company of the RNRMC. Let me just explain the format. We're going to run this for an hour, and I appreciate we're eating into your evenings, and you'll have supper and dinner and whatever you want to get to after 8 o'clock. So we will finish at 8. But over the next hour, the Commodore and I are going to have a sort of fireside chat for about 20 minutes or so. And then we're very keen to open it up for a Q&A and to ask questions. And unlike a normal Zoom link where we're just seeing everybody, this is a webinar. So there is a little bit of a process involved when we get to the Q&A, but essentially you need to stick up the little yellow hand, and we'll do this roughly on a first come first served basis, and then the team here will plug you through. And then it's really important when you ask your question that you make sure your camera is on and you're unmuted, because that's a schoolboy error after a year of doing Zoom calls. So let's get things going. I'm delighted to have CSG with us in the studio, Commodore Steve Moorhouse. Can I call you Steve?
You can indeed, thanks.
As I said, Steve you're a great friend of the charity, but you have this extraordinary title. I'm going to ask you just to explain what CSG actually means. But by way of intro, you've had a very distinguished career in the Navy, and I could talk for about half an hour about that, but I think the one thing that stands out is that you are the only person in today's Royal Navy that has been the commanding officer of both of our new aircraft carriers, HMS Prince of Wales and HMS Queen Elizabeth. So if there were ever bragging rights, you've definitely secured those. But importantly, presumably, that qualifies you in quite a unique way to be leading the Carrier Strike Group. So, Steve, explain what CSG, what is that job, and what is the Carrier Strike Group?
The title, Steve, the commander of the UK Carrier Strike Group, and although I suspect there'll be 1 or 2 people that might challenge me, I think it's the most fortunate and privileged job for a Commodore in the Royal Navy, certainly this year. So a real privilege to be selected a year or so ago for the role. And I mean, you touched on my CV and commanding both Prince of Wales and Queen Elizabeth, but I think a really fortunate career, starting life as an aviator, so original time at sea on our old illustrious class as a young aviator, and then through a frigate career, but again fortunate to command HMS Ocean, our helicopter carrier. So the timings of my career have nicely synchronised with the delivery of the Queen Elizabeth class. So good fortune, the right place at the right time, and I think for a number of years I'd been tracking the delivery of the ships and then the inaugural deployment, and I was really fortunate 18 months or so ago to be selected.
Well, I mean, talking of timing, we're here late April now. You're going to set sail with the Carrier Strike Group probably in under a month's time, or exactly a month's time. I mean, it is being described, I think, as the most significant peacetime deployment of its kind for the Royal Navy in a quarter of a century. I mean, why Why is it so significant? I mean, obviously we've got these amazing new aircraft carrier and its jets, but what is the significance of the UK now putting a carrier strike group out on blue water?
I think it's significant for a number of reasons. Over the last 10 to 15 years or so, naval deployments have traditionally been seen as singleton frigates or destroyers, or much smaller groups of ships deploying. So this is the first time in almost a generation where an entity of this scale, 9 ships departing UK waters together as an entity. So I think that's one thing. And then combine that with the level of ambition and the geography, in that looking to move not only through operating in the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, the West Indian Ocean, but pushing on east of Singapore to spend time in the Far East. I think that in itself, so there's the size, but then there's also the ambition and what we're hoping to achieve over the 6-7 months period. At a time, of course, with everything that's going on in the world, I think it's hugely symbolic. So the planets really have aligned on this occasion to make it a once in a generation. I was fortunate on my first ever deployment as a young aviator in 1997 to deploy with a carrier group east of Singapore, and I think this is probably the first time since then that we've deployed something of that size. So absolutely is once in a generation.
Now I gather that Secretary of State for Defence Ben Wallace is set to announce on Monday details of the deployment and exactly where you're going to go. So we mustn't get ahead of that announcement.
Or else I may not deploy.
You are basically going east, and you're going quite a long way east into the Indo-Pacific. Why? What of all the places you could go, why has the UK and the Royal Navy and Defence decided on this particular deployment?
So I think the balance of effort in the deployment will see time actually spent in all of those regions that are really key to us. So in no way will we be forgetting the importance of the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, our commitment to NATO, and that will absolutely be a priority for us to demonstrate our utility in what we would call our near abroad. But I think as the integrated review clearly highlighted, the importance of the Far East, or the Indo-Pacific, is growing importance, both economically, the nations out there, and post-Brexit, the Prime Minister's intent to put Britain onto that global stage, to be there as part of the key decisions that are being made, whether that's in entities from the United Nations, the G7. The military clearly have a role to play there. And actually wanting to strengthen those relationships bilaterally with partners out there, or in long-standing alliances, is really, really key. And I think sending the carrier strike group out there to engage and to strengthen those links, and hopefully to trigger the beginning of more persistent and enduring presence out there is really important.
Well, I mean, there is nothing discreet about what you're doing. This is not a low-key deployment. This is, at the pointy end of your business, a hugely capable and credible deployment by the UK. What is the message that delivers for our allies on the one hand in the region, but also adversaries?
Well, I think the carrier strike group offers that full spectrum of military capabilities. Clearly, at one end, the aircraft carrier itself is designed around from the keel upwards to operate the F-35 aircraft. So it really is, in its design, a fifth-generation aircraft carrier that is wedded seamlessly with the aircraft. So at one end, it is absolutely about the ability to offer choices to our political leadership in hard military power should the need arise. But of course, as you know well from your involvement with the Royal Navy over the last few years, we can swing quite easily to the other end, that it's absolutely a convening power in the engagement to support other government initiatives in prosperity, trade. There is a lure to coming to visit the carrier, and if at the same time we can be facilitating and hosting events that help other government initiatives, then that's absolutely right and proper, and something that the Navy's always traditionally been excelled at.
Do you, as a Navy commander in charge of this task group, I mean, when politicians and our masters say to you, you've got to do trade missions as well, and there's a prosperity agenda, and it's global Britain. I mean, how do you and your ship's company and the commanders in your task group, do you embrace that, or is that just a sort of a necessary part of doing
I think
a successful
both. We
deployment?
embrace and it is necessary. I think it's really important that you get the balance right. Fundamentally, this is an aircraft carrier, and we've bought it for those reasons. It isn't the Royal Yacht. But absolutely, the Royal Navy, over years and years, has demonstrated the ability to swing. It's just important that you get the messaging right. And I think demonstrating the capability of fixed and rotary wing aircraft, and particularly on this deployment with the integration of the US Marine Corps, is in itself a message that we want to be sending, that we to our partners and allies, that we are really back on the carrier stage. There are very few nations that can deploy something of this scale and capability on a global basis. So it's absolutely right and proper that the focus should be there, but we shouldn't shy away from the ability of being chameleons and swinging the next day from this uniform to our best uniform to host a trade fair.
But in this uniform, at the pointy end of the business, I mean, the geopolitical environment in the Indo-Pacific, I mean, there are many things going on, not least the big neighbour, China, and some of its activities in the South China Sea and so forth. I mean, what are your instructions? I mean, what do you expect your strike group to be doing in terms of freedom of navigation manoeuvres, working with the US 7th Fleet and others? I mean, is that formed, or do you sort of just see how it goes on the day?
I think the first thing I would say is, over my nearly 30 years, is that very rarely do we ever actually undertake the operational deployment that we planned many months in advance. So over the period of time, I'm sure things will change. But we will absolutely, a key part of the deployment is operating with our partners and allies, whether that's in the Mediterranean, the Middle East, or the Far East. So, and the Americans are clearly central to that. The Dutch are coming on the deployment with us to their frigate, the Everton, but absolutely other key partners, NATO, the Republic of Korea, Japan, etc., that we want to integrate with. But throughout, our posture is one of being, confident in our abilities, demonstrating those capabilities. But we're not seeking to pick a fight. This is not about being confrontational, but being absolutely confident in our ability, upholding those international norms, the rules, particularly of the sea, wherever we see that there's friction there, that we need to be able to abide by those and demonstrate that we uphold them.
So, do you expect to do some freedom of navigation manoeuvres, or is that a?
We're absolutely ready to, if that's what's required. It is not something that we would want to shy away from if that's what we're asked to do.
You're deploying with allies, so we have a US destroyer as part of the task group. There's a Dutch frigate joining you, and importantly, collaboration on the air wing with the US Marine Corps embarked. I mean, there are some commentators that say that's a sign of weakness, that the Royal Navy hasn't got the wherewithal to do it all by itself, that it's having to seek assistance from elsewhere. Is that how you see it?
No, I think that's a really ill-informed opinion that unfortunately still many have. I mean, first and foremost, the strike group is what we would have described as sovereign at its core. So around the Royal Navy aircraft carrier, our Type 45 destroyers, our Type 23 frigates, the Fleet Auxiliary, and the Fleet Air Arm, and our joint 617 Squadron UK Lightning. And this is the first deployment. So there's a journey that the carrier strike enterprise will go on over the next 3 to 4 years, where we'll increase the F-35 footprint. We've got plans in place for further shipping to come, Type 26, solid support in the Fleet Auxiliary. So, but absolutely, on this deployment, we have a sovereign Royal Navy, Royal Air Force capability with the Royal Marines and British Army also supporting us. But such is the lure and the attraction of it that other nations want to be a part of it. And you mentioned the Dutch, and it's a real privilege for them to join them, to be part of it. But also taking the Americans. And it is not a weakness in any shape or form. Anybody that has ever tried to operate from somebody else's ship will realise that integrating another capability and then operating it seamlessly is not a sign of weakness. It's absolutely a strength. I mean, my analogy would be bringing a football player into a team. You know, to bring the individual in and to get the best and make sure the team works efficiently and effectively with them, you know, takes real skill and real practice, and hence the activity we've been doing over the last 18 months to get us to this place. So I think it absolutely shows a strength, and the ability to change the size and shape and makeup of that group is something that we should be really proud of.
Can we talk fast jets?
Yes.
So I think, you know, your task group will have, you know, the largest collection, or the air group will be the, you know, the largest 5th generation, you know, fighter jets that have ever put to sea. Combination of UK and US. Just explain for those that, you know, don't read the magazines and aren't totally in, you know, in the weeds of this. What is the significance of a 5th generation jet, and what is the F-35B really delivering for UK and its allies?
I mean, it's a hugely capable aircraft. The 5th generation, so multi-role. So in all that it's doing, it is, whereas traditionally we may have had to send up a number of aircraft to do different roles in support of operations, the F-35 is almost, I say the jack of all trades, but it is the master of those trades. And together with the low observability characteristics that you would see around with stealth aircraft, it really is truly its 5th generation. So operating that from our deck really does give you a huge advantage. Working together with the Americans, again, adds further to that. And of course, those partners that we will operate with or aim to be you know, exercising with on the deployment in the other F-35 nations, you know, I think is a real strength, and offers, as I said previously, choice to our political leadership. And I think that's the real, one of those maritime attributes, choice at a time and place of our choosing. Maintaining this capability, not just on this deployment, but even when we come back at very high readiness on an enduring basis, is something that we haven't been able to offer our political leadership for many years.
Now, I mean, the Navy has spent many years working with the RAF and different cultures and figuring out how that works. What's it like for your pilots flying alongside US Marine Corps pilots off the same deck, same jet? I mean, is there a similar ethos, different ways of working? I mean, how have you achieved that level of integration?
I think it brings out the best of the military. So each individual service is hugely and rightly proud of their history and their ethos, but there is that wonderful challenge between one another to always want to be better than the other. So it's in a constructive way. It really does drive greater professionalism, learning from one another. And that's not just between the UK and the US, but also, of course, we have on our squadron is a blend of Royal Navy and Royal Air Force. So again, the traditions there, the lessons that both services have experienced through operations around the world over the last few years, you know, it really is pulling that together to make the combined entity really is much stronger for it.
And Steve, when you talk to your counterparts in the US, how big a deal is it for the United States to be putting its treasure on your flagship?
Huge, absolutely huge. And again, I think, you know, we should take it as a feather in our cap. I mean, these are not cheap aircraft, and they are very sought after by the United States. So the fact that they feel comfortable deploying that squadron with the United Kingdom under our command for that period of time, I think, you know, we should be rightly proud of. But I think it then also goes to show, you know, where we may go in the future. The ability for other nations to come and go from that deck. Again, it offers choice and flexibility, which is, I think, is a real enabler in military operations.
Okay, Steve, let's just focus on your people for a moment. I think, you know, in the task group under your command, some 3,700 men and women. How are they feeling right now?
I mean, they're feeling, I think, excited. There's a degree of trepidation. particularly going away at this period of time with all that's going on in the UK with COVID. So that last year has been a real challenge for them. And my thanks to everybody involved in the enterprise, from dockyards, air stations. I think if we sat here a year ago thinking about this entity, I mean, we would have probably questioned ourselves going into lockdown for the first time. But the ships have been to sea throughout that period. Naval training and Air Force training has not stopped throughout. It almost hasn't broken step, which is, a fantastic and phenomenal achievement. And so the young men and women that are embarking for the first time, going away, have done incredibly well to get through the system to join us. But of course, some of them will be nervous as their friends and family are emerging from the recent lockdown. We then take them away. And of course, it will be uncertain, not only in what freedoms look like on the deployment from a COVID perspective, but as I've said, I mean, more often than not, real world events tend to change what we had planned anyway. So I think that excitement of what the deployment will actually look like, but the degree of trepidation of leaving loved ones behind.
And I was reading today, I think all your ships companies are going to be vaccinated.
Yes.
Is that definitely happening?
Absolutely, yeah.
Will be done, first jab all done before?
First jab will all be done before we set sail, and then we'll be issuing the second jab, as shortly thereafter. So yeah, the team will be immunised, which is absolutely fantastic.
Okay, so you head off around May 22nd, 23rd. You're not back until probably the end of the year.
Yeah.
So 7 months. I mean, I guess that's routine business in the Navy, but I think many listening tonight can't imagine what it would be like to be on a 7-month business trip, away from loved ones and family. How do you, especially your younger ships companies who perhaps haven't done this thing before, how do you prepare for that? I mean, how big a deal is being away for 7 months?
It's a really big deal, and we have to sometimes, some of the old and bold have to be a little cautious in being too blasé about it. But if you can imagine the spectrum of people that we have on there, so those with families, married, with children, it is incredibly difficult. And for some of the youngsters, this will be the longest period of time they've been away from their parents, and loved ones, girlfriends, boyfriends. And so the wrapper that we put around them is absolutely critical. Fundamentally, not much has changed from Nelson's time with the divisional system, so the pyramidal system. So every dozen or so sailors will have somebody that looks after them, and that grows all the way up to the commanding officer. And that basic framework is absolutely critical. And today, particularly with support from the RNRMC, the wider wrapper, welfare wrapper of charitable support, mental health, and all of that, the welfare support we put around is really, really key.
So how is the charity practically able to help in the run-up to the deployment and once you're away?
Throughout, the charity's been absolutely, a bedrock from which almost every naval asset builds a deployment from. So everything from making sure we go equipped with everything that will make our life just that little bit more comfortable, and every ship will have their own unique bids, and that's from just making accommodation areas a little bit more habitable, recreation areas, sports kit and equipment, but also looking after families that are at home. I think that's one of the things where the charity has a real strength. And then particularly on this deployment, some of those runs ashore may not quite be what we've been used to. And so supporting us in port visits where we may only be able to get ashore to the jetty, actually this is where the charity will also play to make sure that we can at least allow sailors to stretch their legs and recharge their batteries in as safe an environment as possible if they can't actually get ashore to visit some of these ports.
And Steve, is there a small luxury you take with you on long deployments?
So I have 2 young children, so I take books because it's one of the few times where I actually might get a little bit of peace to read aside from the operation. So yeah, I normally take a good bag full of books to read on those quieter moments if time allows.
Okay, right. Well, Steve, thank you very much. That's given us a very, very good overview. Let's now go to questions, and let me remind you of the system. So everybody knows about little yellow hands, so now's the moment to put up, raise a question. What will then happen is the team here will promote you to be a panelist. That might just take a couple of seconds. Then you'll come onto the screen. Steve and I can see you here in the studio, and then you can ask your question. So, and I know you're all burning with questions, so now is the moment to raise those hands. But while we're waiting for the first ones to come through, Steve, we talked briefly about the Dutch Navy as well. Did you select them, or did they volunteer to come with you? I mean, of all the NATO nations, how do you decide on the composition of the task?
No, they very much volunteered. I think a number of years ago it was signalled that there was an opportunity for nations that may wish to participate. And there'll be a number of other nations, I suspect, in our planning that will be with us for discrete periods of time. But our relationship with the Dutch Navy is really strong and goes back a number of years, particularly or originally around the amphibious community with our Royal Marines. But they signalled very early on that they would like to be a part of it, and they have joined us from day one in generating. So we've trained with the Everton. We know the people there well. You know, they are fantastically professional, and we'll just add another dimension. You know, their perspective is different. It's another navy, but one where our links are really strong. So we're really looking forward to taking them.
And explain a little bit about how the task group then works. I mean, I imagine that you all, you know, sail in line together, but it doesn't work like that in practice, do you? You have units.
Absolutely, and sometimes we're our own worst enemy. The pictures you often see in the media of a very tight formation, I would probably describe that as the changing of the guard, or our parade picture, to use an army analogy. You know, more often than not, there will be units that are hundreds, if not thousands of miles away, undertaking, you know, absolutely separate and discrete activities, and then very much like we've used the analogy of a bit like a beehive, we have the ability to bring everybody back to the hive around the queen bee as the situation or the threat may dictate. But often you would look out of the window on the bridge of Queen Elizabeth and not actually see any of the other strike group. You know, such is the effect that we can have over large regions.
So I've had one question that's come in really about the class of carrier, the Queen Elizabeth carrier, and so you've been on the bridge driving both of these carriers. I mean, I think obviously there's a huge sense of national pride, and the Navy appears delighted with them. But to what extent are they really world class? Or are we drinking our sort of own Kool-Aid on this? I mean, are they as good as everybody is making out these carriers to be?
I think they're better, and I generally mean that. The time that we've spent in 2018 and 2019 working across the United States, the American seniors have been on board, and they are genuine in their praise, and a slight scratching of the heads as to how the Brits have achieved it. In simple terms, you know, for 1/3 of the cost in about a half of the time, and crewed by 1/3 of the personnel, we have an aircraft carrier that is on a par with the latest of the American aircraft carriers, you know, designed around the F-35. So the American Navy are taking that jet to sea, but they are trying to engineer it into an older carrier. So it's not as efficient, it's not as effective. Throughout, there's some innovative technologies that have allowed us to really get at the personnel bill, not in a way that takes risk, but we've embraced some technologies that you would recognise across other maritime environments, a lot more remote monitoring, sensors, etc. So you've got something that is really capable with lots of redundancy still, so we're not absolutely reliant on it. And it is generally making people sit up, and people that are interested in the carrier game are very interested in the design of the Queen Elizabeth class.
Okay, well there may be an export possibility there, you never know. So I think we, actually Adrian is first up. So Adrian Bell, do you have a question for us, or for Steve? Just plug.
Steve, can you hear me?
We can.
Excellent. My camera's not working. I don't know why. Oh, hang on a sec. Just got that. That should be.
We can see you.
Both of you, thank you very, very much indeed for this. Absolutely fascinating. And Steve, I sort of sit here and looking at the world scene at the moment, and you know, you're going to go past the Black Sea and all that's going on there. You've got the tensions out in the China Sea and the international waters stroke national waters debate and all those sort of things. Are those the things that, I don't know, keep you awake at night, or are there other things that might keep you awake at night?
Thanks, Adrian, for starting off easily. No, absolutely, and as you will remember well, we're continually horizon scanning. So events that we're seeing in the Black Sea, engagement with Iran over the JCPOA and everything in the South China Sea are clearly things that are alive and running and hot and current topics. But there is always something. I mean, my experience in the Navy says there is always something that comes out of almost nowhere. Quite often that's environmental. So we respond to disaster relief as much as anything. But there is normally something that comes out that we almost couldn't predict. And I think that's one of the key things for the team, is constantly planning and being prepared and thinking what if. And it may often happen when frigates and destroyers are, as I've said before, disaggregated and a long way away. And I think that's getting that across to political leadership, is that there's such flexibility and range of options in our responses that we should always consider that. And it's something that I don't think we've actually had or been in a position to offer our seniors over the last decade or so. So I think that is something new, and I've absolutely no doubt there will be something over the next 6 to 7 months that tests and proves that.
Well, thank you for that, Steve. I mean, we'll all be following with great interest to see how it all maps out, and really look forward to, actually, if we had the chance, to speak to you when you come back as well, to sort of the juxtaposition of what you see and say today and what it might have been like at the far end as well.
Absolutely. No, I'd love to. Thank you, Adrian.
Great. Adrian,
no, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the initiative of getting these View from the Bridges going. Simon Black, I think, is with us next. So, Simon, if you can hear us, let's have your question for the Commodore.
There we go. Here I am. Hello to you both. Steve, thank you very much for this. It's been fascinating to hear, and characteristically it's buoyant and purposeful and robust in terms of what we're looking at doing. If you can give yourself the view of, when you get back, the 3 things that you think that we really delivered and we knew that we knocked this out of the park, what would those be that you would say now?
I think first and foremost is the operational activity and the exercise program that we're hoping to undertake would be the one thing we really need to achieve and demonstrate that we truly have a carrier strike capability. So over the last 3 or 4 years, we've been slowly, incrementally building up in scale, complexity. The numbers of aircraft on the deck have increased. So on this deployment, the air wing will be, I think, just over 30 aircraft. So that's a huge step change. And then integrating that, whether that's in a NATO construct or with one of the US fleets, I think will really allow us to demonstrate that we have a carrier strike capability at that hard end. I think the other bit, and I alluded to earlier, is our ability to support wider government activity in the prosperity and the trade piece, to show how, and I do think it's a slightly unique. The Americans don't run their aircraft carriers like this, that we can swing from one end of the spectrum of capability to the other end in a way that the Navy, again, hasn't done for a number of years. And I think the third one, but probably on equal thing, is I have 3,700 young sailors that I'm going with me, and the lived experience for them has to be something that they want to do again. Because if we get it wrong for their perspective, then we have a real problem in the whole manpower model within the service. So it's not that we need to pander to them and make life easy, but it has to be professionally and personally rewarding. And I think that's really, really key, because getting youngsters wanting to A, join up, or B, come back in the next higher rate or rank to undertake the next deployment is a real key for us. So that's the challenge I've certainly set the leadership, is making it rewarding for them.
That's terrific. Thank you. All the best with it.
Thank you.
Simon, thank you very much for your question. Keep putting up your yellow hands, and the team will get to you very, very shortly. Steve, the carriers, I think, have been designed for a 50-year life, and that sounds like value for money. I don't know in practice whether that actually will work. We won't be around to know probably in 50 years. Although I think one of Nelson's companies, Mike Kinsey, donated a barrel or a large bottle of rum to your flagship to be opened on the day she is decommissioned at some point in the future, in which case the rum will be quite mature by the time we get to that stage. But how robust is all of this? And this is a massive effort for the Navy. I think, is it 10% of the Navy is committed in CSG? Is that sustainable? Do you do this every year, or what will the drumbeat of CSG activity be going forward?
So I don't expect that we will undertake a deployment of this scale every year at all. But what we will have is the ability to respond to events. So we will keep the capability at a very high readiness, on an enduring basis. So at the risk of sounding a little trite, on the day we come back, we almost need to be ready to go out again. But ships will come and go from the strike group. So when we come back in the new year, we will be expecting to roll in and out new Type 23s, Type 45s, etc. And of course, we use a trickle drafting process with our people. So people will slowly come in and out of the group. So one of the key challenges that I have with the staff is that objective assessment that our capability maintains throughout. And we'll have top-ups of training throughout the deployment, but also into next year. So it is sustainable, and the model has been designed as such. Your point about the carrier and its 50-year design, I mean, as you know, being on board, there is still a huge amount of space on there that we haven't actually filled. So it was designed and built knowing full well, and arguably with bitter experience with other ship designs, that we will inevitably want to expand. I suspect the aircraft flying off that deck today will not resemble half of what flies off there in 10 years' time. There's all sorts of opportunity. Remotely piloted vehicles, I suspect, will be operating off that deck sooner rather than later. I suspect we will see other nations operating off there. The size and shape of the ship's company, I suspect, will change as technology changes. But there's enough capacity within the design of the ship to embrace that over the coming years. We just need to get the first deployment sorted.
Right. Now, I think we've got a question from Alistair, but we've also, I think I've seen Admiral Sir Jonathan Band's yellow hand went up. So, Admiral, if you want to stick your hand back up, we'll connect you very, very shortly. But let's go to Alistair first.
I think you can see me.
Yes. Hello.
Hear me? Oh, thank you, and thank you, Stephen and Steve. That's really some very interesting and powerful insights. Thank you very much for that. Stephen has mentioned what key messages you want to send to our allies and to our adversaries. Would you expand on what key messages you think this has for us here in the United Kingdom in terms of, for our country, being able to undertake this once-in-a-generation initiative? And particularly for young people watching this, how it will inspire them to aspire to join the Royal Navy and the Royal Marines. And finally, what communications will we get over the 7-month period that keeps us informed, particularly at a countrywide UK level?
So I think I would start, a privileged position of the first commanding officer of Prince of Wales in the final stage of her build process. I mean, if I was looking for something to be proud of, just watching that ship come together, built in 5 yards around the United Kingdom, when those sections finally come and they are accurate to within millimetres, And these are sections of ships that are 10, 15, 20,000 tons in weight. And then the vast array of umbilicals, electrical, plumbing, wiring, etc., all done by UK industry. Something like 15,000 apprenticeships given out in the design and build of those ships, I think is a fantastic achievement, and something that I think inherently British, where we like to knock ourselves. We have delivered a world-class platform that we should be genuinely proud of. To then take it to sea, I think for the young sailor and for those observing, and Admiral Band, if he is about to ask me a question, I think for many years we've sold something, whether the glossy brochure quite lived up to the lived experience. I think this is exactly what the young sailor will hopefully see, in that they've been through an incredibly professional training process despite the constraints of COVID. And they're now deploying to places in the world that they may not ordinarily have had opportunity to get to. They'll be educated professionally throughout. The opportunities are better than they've ever been. And their lived experience and the camaraderie and friendships that they will make, I think, will be second to none. And I look at some of the potential visits that frigates and destroyers will undertake, and it almost wishes I could start all over again and go back and do it. But I think that's would be my observation on being proud and sitting back and watching it as loved ones. With regard to the messaging, we are active on social media, so each of the ships has an account. I mean, the Queen Elizabeth account run by an individual petty officer. So again, I think that just shows the power. Is the most followed military account in the United Kingdom, well over 100,000 followers. There are people that are crazy enough to follow my account as the commander as well. So I think the social media will be very, very regular and keep you up to date. And then together with regular media updates and broadcasts across the range of media. So hopefully you should not be short of information of what we're doing and the activity we're up to.
Great. Thank you very much. Can I wish you every success? I think that's very inspiring. Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair.
Alistair, thank you very much for that. We do have former First Sea Lord Jonathan Band poised to ask a question. So, Admiral, if you're with us, CSG is all yours. So we're just waiting for Jonathan Band to come through.
Right. You should hear me, my voice anyway. Stephen?
Yes, we can.
Right.
Go for it.
Okay, well, don't worry. You're not about to get the Staff College question from hell. I'm far too long retired for that. But I did just want to say four things. First was thank you very much for coming in front of us for this fantastic initiative. Tremendous for everyone to be able to hear the man in charge or the person in charge. And I must say, I thought you've answered the questions brilliantly, but I think the things you chose to say were spot on with me. You're, of course, achieving when you sail in May something in 1998 we dreamt about. 23 years it took to get here. The Navy, as you know, and you've heard me say this, has been in support for far too long in that intervening period. I got fed up with CGSs telling me the Navy did useful things to support their campaigns. Well, we're now back in the van, leading, as you are, an example of maritime strategy. I have to say, a fairly testing one on your first outing. I don't think the scenario could be tougher, but you're ready to go militarily, and I'm sure you are politically as well. And my final point is really to say that as the president of the RNRMC, I would echo the point the CEO said, for goodness sake, use us. There will be times, I'm sure, when the people plan gets a bit raggedy. And certainly having just spoken to the commanding officer of Montrose, who basically had one jetty run ashore in 6 months, you'll be luckier than that, I'm sure. But the charity is incredibly useful to you, and please really use us. So all the best to you all, and bring the 3,700 back.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. And we will absolutely not hesitate in drawing on the charity. I thank them, and Adrian particularly, for all the work he's done in getting us to the start line, so to speak, but also the offer and commitment to continue that support, not only to the ships, but also to our loved ones throughout. So thank you very much indeed, sir.
Admiral, thank you very much for your question. I could almost hear the emotion in your voice when you talked about the journey that got to this point. And I think it's worth just reflecting on that our politicians in Westminster behind us, they now have this at their disposal, but this has been a long journey that has survived, contact with a number of defence reviews. And I think from the Navy's point of view, sometimes a step forward in regeneration of carriers is then met with 2 steps back. Yeah. As you sail out on May 23rd from the Solent, what will you reflect on just what this 20-year journey has really meant?
I echo Admiral Band's view. I've only been living it for the last few years, a number of staff appointments in the Ministry of Defence, and you see, it has been a hugely political beast to get through, and the fact that we're finally here, is a fantastic testament to hundreds of officers across the enterprise over many years that have sweated blood, sweat and tears to get us through here and persevered. It is not lost on me now the responsibility I have and my people to now deliver it. At the risk of, and it's not an arrogant, I think we also have an education process to show our seniors and certainly some of our politicians how we should use it, what it can do, and the capabilities it offers. I don't think that's widely understood yet, and that's something that we hope to be able to do on this deployment of demonstrating the array of options that you've got, across the whole spectrum of military capability. But I'm absolutely alive. I say to the sailors day in, day out, the world is watching. Literally the world, and that is not just from our friends and families and loved ones, but on the neutrals that are undecided will be watching to see which way we fall, and clearly all those that may wish us harm will absolutely have their eye on us, looking for any misstep or opportunity to exploit our misfortune, and that's something we have to be alive to. Each morning we get up is, who out there may wish to cause us harm, and leads to the previous question of, the events, dear boy, will undoubtedly have a part to play, and we just need to be ready for that.
Yeah. So we've probably got, we'll finish dead on time, so you've still got a few moments to get a question in, but one thing that I think many people on this Zoom call will have experienced when we talk about the carriers and as dinner party conversation or whatever it might be, very often the response is they're white elephants and they're hugely vulnerable. And in an era of clever hypersonic missiles and so forth, actually aircraft carriers have had their day. And if you read, Max Hastings' musings on this, quite a few people have downers on aircraft carriers. So what's the reality? Are they vulnerable in a new era of technology? Are they white elephants?
Absolutely not. 2 parts, I think, to my answer is, on one hand, we will hold nations such as the Chinese up and in awe of them because they seem to be getting it right, is what Max Hastings would say. Well, they're trying to build aircraft carriers quicker than we are. So, if they're white elephants, then the Chinese certainly seem to think it's the way to go. And big decks are certainly back in vogue. The Republic of Korea, Japan, 2 nations in the Far East are looking to build big decks. French have just committed to another one. Indians, etc. So I think the age of the big deck is not over by any stretch of the imagination. And the other thing I think is simple military observation is the big deck moves. And unlike other airfields fixed ashore, it moves, and it is absolutely defended by rings of steel. And that's both surface shipping, aircraft, subsurface capabilities. It is the most well-defended British airfield, fact. And I don't think that would be argued by even the most ardent Air Forceman. It is the most well-defended airfield we have, and the fact that it moves up to 300-400 miles a day just adds to the capability and the complexity should you wish to try and target it.
We've had a message from Steve Dingley who says, "Good luck on the deployment. Up spirits from Pusser's Rums." So, yeah. I mean, one of the things that we're going to be collaborating on, the two of us, is the staging of the Pacific Future Forum, which is the UK's sort of becoming the seminal annual Defence, Security, Trade, Prosperity Summit. And we ran this for a few years, starting in New York on Queen Elizabeth. And I know it's a huge ask of your ship's company to suddenly organise almost a G7 style summit on the hangar deck. But why? I mean, I obviously believe that that's an important thing to do. But from the Navy's point of view, why is using the convening power of these carriers the right thing to do and a relevant thing to do?
I think, I mean, the convening power brings the audience in there, but I think the carrier as the backdrop is the actual demonstration of so much of the conversations that we've seen in the three previous versions of the Future Forum of innovation, technology, upholding international rules, that rules-based system. I mean, the carrier is the best exemplar of that. And I think too often, if you're doing this in a conference room in a generic hotel somewhere in the world, it may lose a little bit of substance. But doing it with the backdrop of Queen Elizabeth, as we saw in Annapolis 18 months or so ago, with the aircraft there, etc., it really brings the message to life. And there's no doubt the convening power, whether we've seen it of chiefs of industry, thinkers, politicians, it really does bring it to life. And it's a wonderful, wonderful backdrop and a privilege to host it. And again, that demonstration of being able to swing from the previous week being at sea, launching wave upon wave of fifth generation aircraft, to supporting yourself with a Royal Marines band, with an audience of hundreds of the great and the good.
Well, I do remember in Annapolis when colleagues from the Pentagon and CNO and others came on board the carrier for the summit. The Americans were quite amazed because they do not use their aircraft carriers like this at all. And so I think, from the UK's point of view and the UK taxpayers' point of view, again, this is using, if you like, the soft power projection of a world-class aircraft carrier to good use. Finally, Steve, Prince of Wales, I mean, I think I'm right in saying that in the recent integrated review, the Defence Review, the decision is now made that the UK will run 2 operational carriers, presumably one at sort of near readiness, the other on tasking. Again, how does that work in practice? And bluntly, do we have enough aircraft, enough of the F-35s to have 2 operational carriers? How will it work?
So the model as we go forward, as the F-35 buy continues, is that one of the aircraft carriers will be at the very high readiness I've described and ready, and then the other one will be at slightly lower readiness. I would say more often than not, probably in UK, North European waters, training and generating ready to assume the mantle, and of course training the next pilots that will be coming on. And so one of the real skills that we've got to master, that we've lost since getting out of the carrier game, is how we swap over that readiness from Queen Elizabeth to Prince of Wales, which we'll need to do in a couple of years' time. And of course, when Queen Elizabeth is away, in a contingent perspective, then Prince of Wales will be absolutely at home, and there's plans for her this summer to support UK activity. Our frigates and destroyers will clearly also be at home to make sure this is not about leaving the home unprotected in any shape or form. So all of our responsibilities for homeland defence, North Atlantic, support to NATO will continue unabated, whilst the carrier is also, potentially operating at the other side of the world.
And am I correct in that these 2 carriers are identical? I mean, when I was on Prince of Wales last week, I think they they were claiming that they're the bigger of the two, that they're a slightly longer carrier than Queen Elizabeth.
There's a statement or an allegation from the CEO of Prince of Wales that they added a little bit to him. She may have an inch or two on Queen Elizabeth. I've not actually seen the data myself, but I think again that just there's a really good healthy rivalry, and ex sailors in the Ordnance will know that in classes of ship, just having that good, healthy competition spurs you on just to keep striving, to learn from one another, but always wanting to be that little bit better than the other one is really good and really powerful. And the two ships are learning from one another on a daily basis.
So thank you. And finally, I've just had a message from Admiral Ian Lower, ACNS, to you, Steve, saying, fair winds, following seas, Steve. Don't forget to get us that twin carrier FOT before you depart UK waters. I think what he means there is to see both the carriers together at Spithead, maybe at the end of May. Or
aye, Admiral.
Aye, Admiral. I think, sadly, we're out of time. This is a conversation I would love to continue. But your time, Steve, is hugely precious. And on behalf of the RNRMC and everybody on the Zoom call this evening, I mean, thank you for giving up a couple of hours to come in to London. I mean, we do wish you every success, with a deployment that is nothing short of historic. So we will be following and watching with great interest. And
thank you for the support of the charity.
Thank you very much for joining on the call this evening. Love to have your feedback. I hope this has worked and the technology has worked. Sorry if we didn't get to your question. We hope to make this a series, and I'm delighted to say that Sir Ben Key, who's Chief of Joint Operations, also a great friend of the RNRMC, has agreed to come into the chair here at the end of June or possibly early July. And of course, Ben has huge oversight of all armed forces activities and deployments operationally around the world. So there'll be lots to talk to him about. And we can even ask him by the end of June how Steve and his carrier group is getting on. So we can mark that scorecard for you when we get to that point. So thank you very much. I promised we'd finish by 8 o'clock, allow you to go and have an evening drink or grab your supper. Really appreciate it. Thank you for the technical team who've helped pull this together. Have a very good evening, and see you next time we do A View from the Bridge. Many thanks.